Today down in the comments, I want to know what is your favorite horror or monster themed board game. Now this could be something from when you were a little kid, this could be something from this new kind of wonderful golden age of tabletop board games we're living in now. It just has to be something spooky and you get together and you roll dice with your friends. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-Shirt, the channel where we talk about new or reissue horror movies and pair them with a book that you might enjoy if you like those movies. And today, we are not talking about a horror movie. We are talking about a board game that is based on some of the best horror movies of all time. So I think it fits. It fits the channel. Don't get upset. Don't unsubscribe. But if you like this review and this is your first time to the channel, know that I don't usually do board game stuff. But if you like horror movies, maybe subscribe, maybe go look at my other stuff you might enjoy. Maybe pick up one or two of my books if you like creepy stuff, if you like classic horror. You'll probably enjoy my fiction. And today we're going to be talking about Horrified, the new game from Ravensburger, or I'm not quite sure how to say the company that is predominantly a jigsaw puzzle company, but has recently gotten into games with a real gusto and has released a number of cool games, many of them licensed with Universal and Disney, bigger licensed games, but this is Horrified. It is based on the Universal monsters. Horrified is a game for 1 to 5 players. You can play it by yourself. I have not played it by myself. This is going to be a review of this game from someone who does not normally review board games. My wife and I, we do play board games. We have a pretty decent board game collection. And we do have friends that we normally have game nights with. We'll do a game night maybe once a month, sometimes more frequently than that. So this has been play tested. We played this about 4 times. We played it twice with 4 players and twice with 2 players. And it is the kind of game that actually does scale pretty well. I don't know how 1 player is, I don't know how 3 players is, I don't know how 5 players is, but 2 and 4 plays perfectly, plays like butter each time. Now the first thing you'll notice about Horrified is it's gorgeous. It's got this beautiful art that is not 100% credited, but I went online because I thought I knew that at least some of the art was done by Gary Pullen, who you'll know from his work with Rue Morgue and his work with Mondo. He does incredible horror art. And the other art credit I could find was Phantom City Creative. So it's a beautiful looking game, inside and out. But the first thing that pinged me, because I'm such a obstreperous nerd, is that when I picked this up on the store shelves, I got it at Target. It's not an exclusive, but I think like Target's pushing it pretty hard. I picked it up and I was like, well, this looks amazing, but they don't have the likenesses of Lugosi and Karloff and Lon Chaney. They don't have the monsters don't have the exact look that they have, even though this is a officially licensed Universal Monsters game. But that's really just the most minor of things, and it's almost probably a deliberate attempt on their part, because this game has its own kind of feel to it, even though it's very reverent to Universal Monsters, as we'll see. It just has this nice unified. You're not playing a licensed game. You're playing a game that is very much its own thing kind of feel to it. So we're opening it up, and it's just replete with art. There's these beautiful, on each side, there's these beautiful kind of stylized portraits of each of the monsters. And then once you get interior box, you've got little bios of the monsters. Just very, very cool stuff. Yeah, there's our boy Gilman. And just so beautiful. And then when you first open it, you get this great kind of reveal that there is a title card. There is a little bit of a warning. It's got that kind of ballyhoo vibe, that spook show vibe, that William Castle vibe. But again, it's not a scary game. It's just a regular old board game. You open it up, you see you've got all the content. All our boards have been punched and all that stuff because, hey, we played this. We played this a bunch. But this is a cooperative game, and that's kind of what's so great about it. It's not the kind of game where you're going to end the night pissed off at your friends because Tommy beat you and you think he cheated because he interpreted a rule wrong. What's great about it is you randomly choose your heroes. There's a bunch of survivor characters that are not explicitly based on any characters within the Universal Monsters lore. Here are the survivor characters. You get every person has a slight special ability. Some of them do seem to be better than others. There are certain synergies that you could have between these characters, but that's why when we've been playing, we've just randomized them and handed them out, because it seems unfair to be like, oh, well, I'll take the one that clearly has a better power that works better with this, and I understand how to use it. It just kind of keeps us on our toes when we're playing. And then, yeah, sure, the heroes are cool, but you get this little bag of plastic monsters. You do not play every game with every monster. They recommend you start with two. You kind of start with Dracula and the creature, just because they're kind of the more straightforward characters. They're a little bit easier to beat. But then when you play the game, you're meant to choose 3 monsters and put them on the board. And what's so great about this game, and what I really think sets this game apart from similar cooperative games like Pandemic, which is, even though it's a great game, it's pretty close to the same every time. Your roles switch. You know what you're going to get when you play a game of Pandemic. When you play a game of Horrified, at least so far, you mix and match these different monsters, and it's going to drastically change your goals and how you're going to go about moving on the board, how you're going to go about, as a team, defeating these monsters, who you're going to prioritize, because, you know, maybe the Wolfman is a little bit harder than Dracula, and Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein, which are played together. They are the one monster in the game that's technically 2 monsters. They seem a little bit harder to throw, and they could really gum up your plans. So it's like, okay, let's get rid of them first, and then let's move around the board and try to get save villagers and things like that. So the goal of the game is, once you pick these 3 monsters, is to utilize your special powers, utilize the kind of incentives and power-ups that you pick up as you move through the board, as you save villagers, move them off the board, to defeat these monsters. Each item that you draw from this blind bag tells you where it's supposed to go. So this goes in the church, it's wine. You go and you put the wine in the church, and if any of your characters are near the church, you can go pick up the wine. And each monster has a special win condition that you have to use either a certain color or a certain strength of item to do different things across the board. For example, Dracula, you have to, at the 4 corners of the board, they don't change. Every time you play with Dracula, the crypts are in the same place. There are caskets, and you have to go smash the caskets, and all the while Dracula's running around the board, trying to kill villagers, trying to kill your heroes. But once you smash all 4 of the caskets, you can, one of your players can fight Dracula. And if this sounds complex, if this sounds like you're a kind of person who's, hey, I just clicked on this video because I'm a horror fan, I'm not a gamer, it's incredibly self-explanatory. You could almost play the game without ever reading the rulebook, which we kind of did for our first game. We just watched like a 10-minute video on YouTube that was someone explaining how to play the game. Then we laid out our cards, and then we just basically followed the directions. Like, as you're rolling dice, as you're moving around the board, you have a little cheat sheet that they give you that tells you the 7 kinds of actions you can do. And then when you flip it over, it tells you how to move for the monsters and how to handle the monsters. It's really on rails. As far as board games go, if you're not a big board gamer, it actually might be a pretty good one to start with, because it is so self-contained and so self-explanatory. But as I say that, what's great about it is it's not easy. We lost just as many times as we won playing the game. And each time we lost by like a very thin margin. It was like, oh, if we only had one more turn, or oh, if we'd only done this or prioritized this a little bit earlier, we would have won the game. That's kind of the hallmark of a good cooperative game. Does it feel fair, and does it feel like you have a chance of winning, even if you've like somehow randomized the monsters, randomized your rolls, and drawn kind of the worst stuff, drawn kind of the hardest possible version of it. The Mummy is super hard. It's super kind of complex. As I talked about, the Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein are 2 monsters in one. The goal is to keep them apart until you've taught them what it means to be human, and then you have them both come together, and Boris Karloff and Elsa Lancaster, you know, live happily ever after. So like that's the kind of game it is, where it does feel hard. It does feel difficult at times, but it never feels alienating. And it's always fun because you're a group of 2 people or a group of 4 people, you know, trying to beat this board that is stacked in such a way. There's a deck to control the monsters, and there's a deck that are kind of rewards and incentives to power you up. Another thing that I really like about the game, and I'm going to keep comparing it to Pandemic because that's kind of the main cooperative game that I feel like I'm familiar with, that I feel like a lot of people are familiar with, is a little bit, when you play Pandemic, it feels like the smartest person in the room or the person who's most versed in the game is kind of playing for everyone, where it's like a co-op game, but it's like, oh, actually, Joey, you move over here because you've never played this game before. You don't really know what's going on. Why don't you move over here, and that's your 4 actions, and then I'll go, and then I do my thing. It doesn't really feel like that, or at least there are elements of the game put in place to kind of dissuade that kind of gameplay, where the game's just complex enough, your cards are just interesting enough, or are just complex enough that there are definitely multiple ways to skin a cat and multiple ways to problem solve, where everyone's kind of putting their best idea forward, and some people are remembering, oh, actually, I can do this on my turn, so why don't you do this now? Oh no, that won't work, because why don't we use that power to do this? So it becomes more of a debate, and it becomes more of a thing where you're like, oh, we are actually playing this game together. We are actually being forced to cooperate by the rules, by the way the game is set up. And as far as being a fan of Universal Monsters, the very, very best thing about this game is that it is replete with little references, little nods on all the cards. All the villagers are you know, Lucy from Dracula, or Maria, the little girl with the flowers from Frankenstein. They are all kind of representative of characters from these films. It's just the kind of game where it's clear that a lot of care was put into how we design this, how it looks. And look, there's the cane from the Wolfman, the silver-handed cane. It's just the kind of thing where you feel like you don't have to be a fan of Universal Monsters in order to play this game. As I said, I was playing with my wife, and she did not grow up a monster kid like I am. She's definitely not a horror person. She can hang. She enjoys these things, but not to the obsessed amount that I do. But one of the best things I can say for the game is that we played a few games over the weekend, and then, you know, come Monday, it was like, well, what do we do? Do you want to play another version? Do you want to play the game again? Yeah, let's do it. What's the one monster we haven't played with? Well, we haven't played with the Invisible Man yet. Oh, you know what? I should throw in the Blu-ray of The Invisible Man, and we'll watch this James Whale movie as we work through this game. That's the kind of fun of this game, especially if you have kids, especially if you have loved ones that like games, but maybe aren't 100% monster people like we are. It is a real gateway drug, or I could see it being a real gateway drug, not only to games, but to the Universal Monsters universe, for lack of a better word, not the dark universe, or maybe it is the dark universe. Maybe they're going to do an expansion that's got Javier Bardem sitting in a chair, and that'll be cool. For this week's book recommendation, I want to talk about He Who Types Behind the Rose: A Decade of Horror Drive-In. This is by Mark Sieber. Mark, if you know him, he is kind of horror fan extraordinaire. He runs a blog called The Horror Drive-In that has like a message board attached to it and stuff like that. He's kind of been a fixture in the horror lit scene, but also he crosses over to the horror movie scene. He's a cool guy. Cemetery Dance just released this paperback, which is a collection of essays from his blog, The Horror Drive-In. Now, if it seems like, okay, well, it's just a collection of essays that are still available on this website, The Horror Drive-In, did someone just print the internet and that's what this is? Yes, but it's nicer than that. Yes, but it's better than that. This is kind of a great, I'd almost like suggest this as like an easy read, a kind of, you pick it up, you pick at it a little bit, you put it back down, you watch some of the movies he talks about, you read some of the books he talks about, and you kind of come back to it. It's in chronological order. It's very kind of simple. It's got a nice introduction by Jeff Strand, and it starts in 2006, and then it kind of just moves through to more recent stuff. The essays are usually pretty short. They're usually like 2 pages, page and a half, sometimes 3 pages. But they're full of this kind of fandom that we don't see much of anymore. It is a critical look at horror cinema and horror fiction, and kind of bleeding between those two. Mark is a voracious reader and a voracious film fan, and he knows a lot about film, and he knows a lot about books. I would hazard to say he knows more than you or I put together, depending on who's watching this video, unless it's Mark Sieber himself, and then he just knows exactly what he knows. But it's a really, really fun read. I'm not all the way through it yet. Like I said, I have been kind of picking it up, picking at it, and moving on. Most of the entries have a little bit of an italicized portion. They're like he's looking back over these essays, and he'll sometimes be like, he'll sometimes contradict himself, being like, "Oh, my predictions were way off in here," or "Oh, my take on this has changed," or "Oh, I'm talking about this author," and this happens sadly a bunch of times in the book, where it's like I'm talking about good things coming from this author or what this author will release next, but the author passed away shortly after the article was written, or some years after the article was written, or in the intervening time since the article was written. But it's a really neat nonfiction approach to horror. If you're into the kinds of movies we're talking about, and if you are a kind of classic horror fan that is a little bit more skeptical of the newer stuff, I think Mark is right there with you, even though I disagree with him on a lot of things. I think he has really good taste, and I think it's really interesting to see someone else's perspective. And the book's got a blurb by Joe Bob Briggs. It says, "Well written, intelligent, insightful, and above all, honest as hell." And if you enjoy film writing, if you enjoy writing about horror, and Joe Bob Briggs is recommending something, you're probably sitting up in your seat. But it's just a nicely designed, Lynn Hansen did the cover and the wraparound for this, nicely designed little paperback from Cemetery Dance. If you like this video, please hit like. If you really like this video, please subscribe. Go check out my other videos. Like I said, I try to do a review of a horror movie and a horror book in every video. If you want to find out more about me or my novels, I've written comic books, novellas, full novels, a couple screenplays when they let me, but you can find out all about those. You can go to my website, join my mailing list. I'll send you a free novel sample, a couple free short stories, and very, very, very much appreciate it. And all the people that have reached out to me via comments, via Instagram, via Twitter, and told me they've enjoyed the books, told me they picked up the books. I really, really, really appreciate that. I really appreciate you guys spreading the word, posting reviews on Amazon, doing all that stuff. It makes this a lot easier. It makes this a lot more rewarding. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week with another video.